What up, people? This is Vigilante, and I'm looking at this book. This book is called Things I Learned While Walking by Daunte Henderson. I said, let me find out what this book is about, and I wanted to break it down to all the good readers. And so the only way I could do that is bring Daunte Henderson in here. He's a writer for Reason for Rhymes. And let's talk about the book, Things I Learned While Walking. Tell me about it, brother.
So my name is Daunte Henderson. I'm from St. Louis, Missouri. I started off my career as a visual artist. One cool thing about my family, we're all very expressive people. You know, my mother, while she's not necessarily an artist and everything, the way she can, really tell a story is always really colorful. She gets that from my grandfather, my uncle. He's like, kind of like a jokester of the family, but there's still a communication aspect within that, and we're just creative people. My uncle, especially, he gave me his love of art. He introduced me to various different art forms like, Jacob Lawrence. He introduced me to rap in a certain way. Even though I kind of grew up in a Jehovah's Witness household, my mother let me listen to rap. And it was one of the things that really inspired me to be a writer, because when you look at rap, there is nothing but poetry over a beat. And I was very inspired, by, early, artists like Public Enemy, KRS-One. And when I got a chance to listen to Outkast had this spoken word artist that would be featured on this track. He's part of the Dungeon family. His name is Big Rube. And Big Rube would get on the end of the track and spit something like super nasty on a spoken word tip. And most notably, it was Liberation. And, I ended up getting that tattooed on my arm. It became such an impactful thing that, I was just like, man, like, what, if I could ever, be a spoken word artist, I want to be like Big Rube. But, I'm not necessarily the spoken word type of guy, because at the end of the day, I'm still a person. I like to read. And it really inspired me to kind of, want to take my little leap into poetry. Because like I said, I started off as a visual artist. My work was in the St. Louis Art Museum. It's been, across the nation in different galleries. And I've gotten respect as a visual artist. But as I got older, I saw a need to transition away from that and start picking up the pen. So my mecca into becoming a writer, it started off with, Boyce Watkins. I wrote for him for a little minute for Your Black World. I started this Facebook group called Daunte Henderson is a Writer. And I'm sorry I'm going off on a tangent, but I feel it's necessary to give you the backdrop for the reason why Things I Learned While Walking exists. Through platforms such as Your Black World with Boyce, my Facebook group, me doing little different performances at my alma mater, Bradley University. And I actually learned under a poet laureate, Kevin Stein, in Illinois, while I was a student at Bradley University. And he gave me, one of the illest recommendations ever at the end of the class. I got an A, by the way. He's like, man, you know what? You should really think about publishing a book. So, I graduated from Bradley December 2008, and I was on the couch. Like, I had just graduated, was thinking I was about to become a public relations PR guy. I thought I was either going to do that or I was going to go off and become, a student affairs administrator. None of that worked out. So it kind of put me in a very, fragile place, because you go from being like the man on campus, being this really big active student leader, to now you're back working in the cafeteria with a hairnet on, serving people chicken fingers who you used to be in front of, giving presentations and everything. So it was like I was in a real humble place when I wrote this book, because I was sleeping on my frat brother's couch. I ended up moving to Chicago from Peoria, Illinois, where my college was, and, I wasn't, working in the cafeteria at my old school no more, but I was definitely making a minimum wage working at U.S. Sailor on 52nd and Ashland in Chicago. And if you know what 52nd and Ashland is in Chicago, that's Motown. And it was just a community I had never grown up around. That was my first time ever kind of standing in the hood, as they call it. And in between me selling cell phones, I started jotting down notes, and I started writing poetry more. I had a T-Mobile sidekick at the time, and I would just flip over my sidekick, and I would just start, writing rhymes or just writing poetry. And I started, just compiling so much work And I started noticing some common themes amongst my work. I was, talking a lot about the black community and the condition of it. And on the south side of Chicago, it's a lot of poverty. It's a lot of people that have, been, looked over by society. It's a lot of people that, have not been educated. Some brothers and sisters, they have turned to, the black market to do certain things. Like a lot of my customers, truthfully, they was like the D-boys and the trappers of the neighborhood. They would come in there and buy like 10 phones, wouldn't put like no name on them, and it would just be like, all right, and just drop like a wad of cash on me. It'd be like, yo, homie, I'm gonna come back and pick this up in about an hour, have it ready. So, like, that's just a little different, a little mind state. I come from being around all these preppy boys in high school and college, to now I'm just like, I'm up close with the Chief Keefs of America.
Yeah.
So I put all of that into my story, and I, talked about the condition of black America, especially in some of our, poverty-stricken areas. And if you read my story, you'll notice that there are some common themes that not only does Chicago suffer from it, but St. Louis, Kansas City. It's just hood USA. And also I talked about my story, and part of my story, my personal story, was I was really trying to find out who I was as a man when I graduated. And I felt like I had a good grasp of who I was, but it wasn't really until I found God that I really understood my purpose as a man. And one of my purposes on this earth was to be an artist that is going to not only tell his story for the purpose of, a healing process and a creative expression for myself, but my work helps other people. A lot of the issues that I address in my book, such as, self-esteem, finding your purpose, really understanding who you are in God, and just really just understanding who you are just as a human being. Everybody goes through that. And my book is part expression, it's part healing, and it's a literary documentary of who I am. At the time when I was writing this book, like I said, I was underemployed or unemployed, or making minimum wage after just graduating from college. And when you graduate from college, you just think like I'm about to go out here and make a whole bunch of money.
Yep. It
really wasn't like that for me. I had to stay on my frat brother's couch, and through that type of pain that I was kind of going through at that time, it turned out some of my greatest art. My woman, she had broke up with me, and just like Richard Pryor said, when you break up with your woman, that's your diploma. So like at that time, I had 2 diplomas. I had a college degree, and I had my woman that just broke up with me, and didn't turn back. So I dedicated like a whole half of my book, not only just to like one woman. I was just talking about my relationship history just in general, because it was something to be said about that too. Because my whole introduction to writing, it started off kind of with, listening to rap, and, I always was a fan of LL Cool J's I Need Love. And, some of those I need love type isms, they showed up in my poetry to girls that I would write in middle school. And you go 10 or so years later, that now becomes poetry that's now in a book. And the second half of my book is called Letters to Mrs. Henderson. And Letters to Mrs. Henderson is a poetic documentary of what I've went through dating wise in order to get to the woman that I'll eventually marry. So hopefully, my future wife, she'll read that, and she'll be like, man, okay, so you had to jump through a bunch of different hoops. You weren't always this dude that I'm about to say I do to. So, I talked about that. First half of my book is called Lessons, Observations, and Recollections. And it's just basically like my views on the world, my views on like the black community and the things that, I feel like we need to do to take ourselves to a definite level of progress. Like I said, working in Inglewood, Illinois, it put me up close and personal with our struggle. I saw it every day. I would see, brothers that were, 10 years younger than me that have already kind of just said, like, yo, like I'm about to just turn to the streets because, schools are not reaching me, schools are not teaching me. And that's sad, when you think about brothers, who could be your nephews, who could be your sons, that just don't really feel like they have a place in the world. and they feel unheard. And I feel like I was able to tell their story through my book. I talked about, my conversion into getting baptized. While I'm a person, I believe in, God, exists in a lot of different formats, no matter what you call them. Mm-hmm. I got baptized through this book. So that's a transformation in itself. And just going from just this man who sees himself as just Daunte Henderson, the physical person, and seeing myself in a different light as a spiritual being, that was something to be talked about. So I talked about that in my book. And just overall, just observations just on life. I don't think we get a chance to really take a step back and reflect on our story. Our story is really important because it informs who we are, it informs how people see us, and it informs where we're going. And one thing I really focus on is self-improvement. I've always liked Marcus Garvey. I've always liked, Black men who have been purpose-driven and who really have the foresight for the future. So, it's almost like a vision board, because some of the things I spoke about in this book I hadn't accomplished yet, but I've eventually accomplished them now. So it is basically the autobiography is a small snapshot of me and things I learned while walking. It's my first book of 3 books, and it won't be my last book, but it's probably been my greatest accomplishment to date, because it let me know what was possible. And a lot of us as Black people, we need to understand what is possible, because some of us lack the perspective to know that we're greater than what society shows us, and greater than what, sometimes even other people pour into us. You can do anything that you want to do. I wrote this book on my cell phone. I wrote this book while I was making minimum wage. Mm-hmm. And I promoted it myself. I self-published. And it's taken me across the country. I've had a book signing at Human Bookstore in New York. Mm-hmm. I've had book signings across the country. It's allowed me to go speak at different places, and it's given me some keys to a few different doors that I might not have had if I didn't really take the first step to become an author. So Things I Learned While Walking is my I guess greatest accomplishment.
Hey, you summed it up, man. Where can they find this book at?
You can get this book on Amazon.com. Just type on Things I Learned While Walking on Amazon. It'll pop right back up. Just search, or you can just type in Daunte Henderson, Daunte Henderson. I got 2 other free books. They're inspired by hip-hop CDs, actually.
Okay.
I wrote a book. It's called Philmatic. It's based off Nas' CD Illmatic.
Okay.
And I also wrote another book. It's called Not Far Enough, and it's based off Drake's mixtape So Far Gone. And you can get those for free on any Apple product. You just go to the iBook store, and you just type in my name, Daunte Henderson, and my 2 free books will pop up.
No doubt, man. It's good having a conversation with you, man. A lot of times speakers like to speak. I just wanted you to talk so people can hear things I learned while walking. And I want y'all to pick up this book. That's what we do. We stand behind each other. We support each other. That's what we have to do in the Black community. We have to get behind each other and support each other and take each other to the top. And I think this book got some great lessons in there, and I think people will be surprised and influenced by it, man. So any Facebook, Instagram you want to let the people know?
Absolutely. So you can find me on Facebook. Just type in Daunte Henderson. My profile, my regular profile will pop up. Trust me, we can be friends. It's all good. And also, please like my fan page. It's just Daunte Henderson. I'm on Instagram and also Twitter as Daunte Writes. Just DaunteWrites. Daunte Writes. So follow me.
All right. Be on the lookout for more from Daunte Henderson. Once again, the book is called Things I Learned While Walking. This has been Vigilante, and we are the movement, and we are out.